The study was silent, the way a room gets when it's been stripped of memory. The wall where 5 vintage guitars had hung for decades held only hooks and dust.
5 guitars. 5. And not a single one still hanging.
He took 2 steps inside, and his foot crunched on paper. A crumpled green slip, like a receipt from a place you don't want to be.
Number. No, no.
He smoothed the ticket on his thigh. The handwriting was his son's, rushed, guilty. Below it, in block letters, 30 days.
Kevin Merrill. $400. He pawned them.
The words landed like a door slamming shut in an empty house. One of those guitars wasn't just his. It belonged to a man now gone, a legend.
That guitar was his.
His hand rose slowly, palm half open toward his chest, as if trying to hold in something that was already gone.
30 days. Kevin sold history for a month's rent, and he never even asked.
John Merrill drove across town with the pawn ticket folded in his fist. The quick cash pawn sign buzzed under an overcast sky. Inside, dust motes drifted through fluorescent light. A balding man in a polo leaned against a display case, eyes sharp.
I am looking for some guitars. My son pawned them yesterday.
You got the slip? I don't open the case for just anyone.
John placed the green ticket on the glass. Rudy picked it up and flicked it with his thumb.
Kevin Merrill. He made it sound like these were his. Said his old man didn't play anymore.
They never were his. Let me see them. All 5.
Rudy led him to a back case, where instruments leaned like forgotten souls. And there, the 1947 Regal with the scratch near the bridge.
That one's beat up. Still, 400 plus the fees, and it's yours. 30 days or it goes on the floor.
He's asking $400 for a relic worth 100 times that. But what do I tell him? Nothing.
John left the pawn shop without looking back. The scratched Regal stayed burned behind his eyes all the way home. He pulled a dented metal box from the closet and dumped its contents on the couch. Decades of faded receipts and warranties.
1979. The estate sale where Eleanor first touched that guitar. The receipt must be here.
The receipt was brittle but legible. 1947 Regal Acoustic. Serial number 4782. Purchased $45. Estate of Clarence Yarrow.
$45. That guitar has traveled a long road to end up in a pawn shop.
He picked up his phone and dialed the only guitar historian he knew. A man named Derek who owed him a favor from long ago.
John Merrill? It's been 10 years. You sound like a man standing on thin ice.
I need you to check a serial number. 1947, Regal, 4782. Tell me who owned it.
That's not possible, John. That serial number is listed in every blues archive. It belonged to Albert King. His main slide guitar.
Albert King's Regal. And my son handed it to a pawnbroker for grocery money.
John did not sleep. He sat in the dark, a framed photo of Eleanor in his lap, and listened to the house settle.
That Regal is where we met. She corrected my barre chord and never stopped talking.
He remembered her fingers tracing the scratch near the bridge, calling it the mark of a played life.
We paid $45 for it. She said it would be our story.
By dawn, guilt had hardened into resolve. John reached for his phone and searched for a certified appraiser.
Mara Hennessy, I have an instrument that needs authentication. 1947, Regal, possible provenance to Albert King.
The appraiser's voice sharpened. She asked for details, dates, and told him to bring the guitar on Thursday.
Thursday. That gives me 2 days to figure out how to get it out of Rudy's hands.
He scribbled a note on a scrap of paper, get it back before day 30, and pinned it beside Eleanor's photo.
She would never forgive him if he let that guitar slip into some collector's vault. Neither would he.
John drove back to Quick Cash Pawn with a desperate lie. He told Rudy an appraiser needed to authenticate his entire collection for insurance.
You want to borrow the guitar? For how long?
3 hours. I'll pay $100 inspection fee. You hold my driver's license.
Rudy pocketed the cash, unlocked the case, and placed the Regal in John's hands for the first time in 2 days. Mara Hennessy's workshop smelled of old wood and varnish. She took the Regal under a bright lamp and went silent.
I need a blacklight. If Albert King marked this instrument, it won't be on the surface.
Under the ultraviolet glow, 2 faint letters materialized beneath the pickguard, AK, in the precise scrawl of a man who knew his own worth.
That's his mark. Albert King scratched his initials inside every guitar he used on tour. This is real.
What does that mean? For value?
Without full documentation, I can't give a concrete figure. But if we can place this guitar in his hands on stage, we're talking museum level.
John returned the Regal and reclaimed his license, but the shop felt different. Rudy's smirk had vanished.
He heard you were making calls about Albert King. That beat-up Regal, suddenly, a lot more interesting.
Word traveled fast in the world of used instruments, and Rudy had caught a scent.
It's a family piece. Sentimental. Nothing more.
Sentimental, sure. But if it's the one I think it is, sentimental just got expensive. $1,500. I got a call from a collector.
John's veins turned to ice. $1,500 was money he didn't have lying around.
You gave me a pawn ticket for 400 plus fees. You can't just triple it because you got curious.
Curious, I got a collector on the phone who'll fly in tomorrow. I am giving you first refusal. 10 days, $1,500, or I sell it to him.
The fluorescent lights hummed. John felt the weight of every cent he'd ever saved, and it wasn't enough.
1,500. I might as well be 1,000,000 miles away, but I will not let that guitar end up in some rich man's trophy case, not Eleanor's guitar.
He drove home with Rudy's ultimatum ringing in his ears. The house felt emptier than it had in years. In the back of the hall closet, behind boxes of forgotten things, he found a shoebox labeled Our Blues, Eleanor's tapes. The old cassette player on the shelf still worked. He pressed play and her voice filled the silence. "This is my favorite, John. The one you played the night we met. That old Regal has a soul. One day it will tell a story." Her voice cracked on the word soul. John closed his eyes and let the tears come.
She always believed that guitar would be in a museum someday. She said it carried the weight of its players.
He rewound the tape and listened again. Each word was a stitch pulling a torn purpose back together.
I won't let it become another man's trophy. It will be where everyone can see it. For you, Eleanor.
He didn't sleep. He called his bank, then the credit union, then a friend who still owed him a favor.
Every cent I can scrape together is a step toward getting that guitar back for her.
John spent the morning selling his father's coin collection, $600. A gold watch his uncle left him brought another $400 from a pawnbroker across town.
That money was supposed to be for retirement, but Eleanor's story matters more.
He cashed out a certificate of deposit early, accepting the penalty. By noon, $2,000 sat in an envelope. At Quick Cash Pawn, Rudy counted the bills, his expression somewhere between disbelief and greed.
You liquidated a lot of old things fast. Should have let me broker the rest.
John said nothing. He watched Rudy stamp the pawn tickets paid and slide 5 guitar cases across the counter. He loaded them into the trunk, the Regal on top, and drove without a backward glance. The car smelled of old wood and loss. $2,000, and now his parents' heirlooms belonged to strangers.
But the guitar is safe. That's what she would have wanted. The rest, I can rebuild.
John returned to Mara's workshop on a gray morning. the regal case clasped against his chest. She had spent a week gathering documentation, archived receipts, press photos, set lists.
The provenance is airtight. Albert King performed with this guitar at Newport in 1950, and it shows up in 16 verified shows.
She slid an enlarged black and white photograph across the table. King held the regal, the distinctive scratch clear under the spotlight.
And the appraisal.
Mara removed a single sheet from the folder. The room fell quiet.
Insured value, based on condition and historical significance, $310,000.
The number crashed into John's chest. 31 letters, and a comma that could change everything.
Kevin took $400. 400.
He gathered the papers, unable to speak, and left the workshop with the guitar case banging against his knee.
Eleanor was right. That guitar has a story, and now I have to decide how it ends.
He barred the study door and sat in the dim light, the appraisal on his knee, and Eleanor's photo on the desk.
310,000. I could buy back every cent Kevin stole, or I could make him pay for the rest of his life.
But revenge tasted like sand in his mouth. Eleanor never wanted that.
Not for sale, not for punishment.
He crossed to the desk and wrote a single line on a scrap of paper, Museum, in memory of Eleanor.
She said that guitar would tell a story, so let it tell hers.
He carefully placed the appraisal and the note into a folder, then locked the guitar in the hall closet.
Kevin will know, but not yet. First, the museum.
He pulled a box from under the bed. Letters Eleanor had written him during their first year. He touched the ink.
This is how I'll say goodbye to her. Not in silence, but in front of the whole world.
The next morning, John called the Blues Heritage Museum and spoke with curator Ellen Cross. She agreed to meet him that afternoon.
Mr. Merrill, if you have the documentation, I'd be very interested.
John handed her Mara's report and the enlarged concert photo. Ellen's expression shifted from curiosity to something raw.
This is Albert King's 1947 Regal. The serial matches the Newport press photos. Where did you get this?
My wife Eleanor bought it at an estate sale in 1979. She loved the blues. She always said it belonged in a museum.
The insured value in this report is $310,000. Are you aware of that?
I am aware. But it's not about the money. It's about my wife. I want to loan it to the museum, not sell it.
We would be honored. Let's draft a temporary loan agreement today. No pressure, just something to protect it while we plan an exhibit.
They moved to her office. John watched as she penned the initial terms: loan duration, insurance, a plaque with Eleanor's name.
She'll have her story now. But Kevin is still out there, and I still haven't decided what to do with him.
On the other side of town, a yellow notice fluttered against Kevin Merrill's door. It was the 3rd this month.
Another one. Just like the last two.
He stepped inside and opened the fridge, a half-empty milk carton and a takeout box with mold.
The pawn money didn't even cover 2 months. Now they want the rest by Friday.
He pulled out his phone. Dad still sat at the top of his contacts, untouched.
He doesn't know about the guitars yet, but the pawn shop must have called by now.
He threw the phone onto the couch, then drove his fist into the drywall.
I can't face him. Not like this.
The eviction notice lay crumpled at his feet, the ink bleeding where rain had soaked through.
Maybe it's better if he doesn't know. Maybe it's better if I just disappear.
John drove past Kevin's apartment without fully deciding to. Some habits outlast trust. The yellow eviction notice on the door caught his eye like a splinter. He pulled over and walked up, reading the cold legal language. Failure to remit rent, eviction proceedings.
3 months behind. The pawn money didn't even give him a cushion.
He drove home in silence, the museum folder on the passenger seat, feeling like it belonged to another life. In his study, He uncovered his father's old typewriter and fed a clean sheet of paper. The keys struck with the rhythm of a man who had already written this in his head.
1 rent payment, and a clause that any future taking of property is theft. No gray areas.
He folded the still warm paper, placed it in an envelope, and slid it into his jacket.
Kevin, it's Dad. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, your place. Be there.
Kevin listened to the voicemail 3 times, the words growing colder with each playback until he pressed call back.
Dad, that notice. I didn't want you to see that. I was going to find a way.
A notice is the least of what I've seen. Be at your apartment tomorrow morning. I am bringing something you need to see.
Dad, I can explain.
You'll have your chance to talk when I am done. Just be there, Kevin.
The line went dead. Kevin stared at the screen, his reflection pale and small against the darkened room.
In 12 hours, everything shifts. The guitar will be hers, and he will understand what he nearly lost.
He opened a small box beside the agreement, Eleanor's wedding band, and a note she'd written him during their first year of marriage. Across town, Kevin slid down the door and sat on the floor, the eviction notice curling at the edges beside him.
Whatever he's bringing, it's going to break me, and there's nothing left to push with.
Before dawn, John sat at his desk and signed the museum loan agreement. The pen moved without a tremor.
For Eleanor, her favorite song never ends. He spoke the words aloud as he wrote them on a small card.
He sealed the card in a thin envelope and tucked it into the museum folder. Then he opened a larger envelope and placed inside the pawn ticket, the appraisal, and the typed agreement. The Regal went back into the hall, safe. John turned the key and pocketed it.
She'll have her story now, but Kevin has to hear the truth first.
He grabbed the envelope, his jacket, and his keys and walked to the car with a stride that didn't look back. The envelope rode shotgun like a passenger, with a secret too heavy to speak.
No turning back. He wouldn't soften the blow.
When he turned onto Kevin's street, the eviction notice still hung on the door like a bruise. Inside the apartment, Kevin paced a trench into the floor, stopping only to rehearse words that never sounded true.
I was going to pay you back. I didn't know the value. Every version makes me sound like a liar.
A knock came, 2 short raps that cut through the stale air like a gavel.
That's not a landlord's knock. That's the sound of something ending.
He opened the door and met his father's eyes. No greeting, no warmth, just the weight of an old man who had stopped being surprised.
Dad,
Sit down, Kevin. We'll talk when I say so.
John walked past him, without waiting, for an invitation, and placed the envelope on the table, like a judge's docket.
Whatever's in that envelope will be worse than any eviction notice.
Kevin sat down, and for the first time in years, he felt smaller than his father. John reached into the envelope and pulled out the crumpled green pawn ticket. He flattened it with 2 fingers. He slid it across the table until it touched Kevin's knuckles.
Dad, I was going to tell you. I got behind.
Behind. You pawned 5 guitars. The Gibson, the Fender, the Martin, the Gretsch, and the Regal. My entire collection.
I lost my job. The rent was 3 months past due. They were going to evict me.
So you stole from me without a word. Hid it. Hoped I wouldn't owe a Schlu to notice.
I was going to get them back as soon as I got work.
John's gaze didn't flicker. The excuse hit a wall of silence.
You had no right, Kevin. They weren't yours to sell.
He's not going to forgive me. He's counting the days until the pawn ticket expires.
John reached back into the envelope. This time he unfolded a single typed sheet with the seal of a certified appraiser.
Do you know what you pawned for $400, Kevin?
He turned the paper so Kevin could see the number circled in red at the bottom.
$310,000. That's the insured value of the Regal. Albert King's Regal.
Number. No, that's not. They were just old guitars. You never said they were worth anything.
You didn't ask. You didn't care. You sold a piece of history for rent money, and you nearly lost it to a pawnbroker.
Kevin's hands started to shake. He looked from the paper to his father and back, as if the letters might rearrange themselves.
I didn't know. Dad, I swear I didn't know.
John folded his arms. The apology hung in the air, too thin to carry the weight of what was missing.
Ignorance doesn't undo it. You didn't just steal from me, you nearly erased Eleanor's memory.
John let the silence stretch until Kevin's breathing was the only sound. Then he spoke without a trace of anger.
I am not going to the police, Kevin.
You are not?
But it doesn't mean I trust you. I've paid your rent this month. After that, you are on your own. No more handouts. If you want my help today, you'll sign this.
He drew the typed agreement from the envelope and slid it across the table.
Any future borrowing of property belonging to John Merrill is theft and will be reported as such.
Exactly. You sign that, and I'll mail you the rent check. If you ever set foot in my house, uninvited again, I'll call the police.
Kevin's hand hovered above the signature line, tendons tight, his name waiting like a judgment. He stared at the pen, and everything John was asking hung in the space between the ink and the paper. Kevin's hand moved before his mind caught up. The pen scratched across the paper, a short, ugly sound. John pulled the paper toward him and folded it once, crisp and final. Without a word, he reached for Kevin's keyring on the table. He detached his house key, the metal clicking against his palm like a door locking.
Dad,
I'll mail you the rent check. Don't call me for more. The guitars are gone. Not in a pawn shop. They're where they belong now.
He pocketed the key and the signed agreement, then walked to the door. The door closed with a soft click that felt heavier than any slammed wood. Kevin sat alone at the empty table, the eviction notice still taped to the other side of the door. A glass case stood in the center of the Blues Heritage Museum, and inside it, the Regal rested on blue velvet. A small brass plaque was mounted below it, the words catching the light like something that had been waiting. It read, "In memory of Eleanor Merrill, her favorite song never ends." Visitors gathered around, drawn by the polish of old wood and a name they half recognized. Near the entrance, John Merrill stood with his hands in his pockets, watching from a distance.
The curator appeared beside him. We're getting calls from blues historians across the country. You gave them something real.
He didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped an inch, and he took a breath that felt deeper than any he'd taken in weeks. A small boy pressed his hands against the glass, mimicking the curve of a guitar. His mother read the plaque aloud. John touched the cold glass himself, the scratch on the Regal floating beside his own reflection. He walked out into the morning sun, the guitar glowing behind him like a heartbeat that never stopped. At home, John turned on the evening news. The screen showed a reporter standing beside the museum display case. The segment highlighted the rediscovered Regal and panned across Eleanor's plaque for a silent 3 seconds. John's hand rested on the framed photo on the mantel. He watched for 30 seconds, then pressed the power button.
She would have loved the music, not the silence. But silence is what I've earned.
Across town, Kevin sat on the floor of his still sparse apartment. The signed agreement crumpled beside his knee. He pulled a small photo from an old wallet. His parents on their wedding day, a guitar propped beside them.
He gave me more chances than I deserved, and I used the last one.
The apartment was quiet. No messages, no visitors. A new lease was taped to the fridge. But the door still had no key from a man who once called it home. He looked at the empty keyring on the table, the metal catching the last of the day's light. At the museum, the Regal stayed lit late into the night, its story now told to a world that would never know what it had cost.